We'd like to begin the service, so if everyone could please come in and take a seat. People can continue to come in, but I'm going to begin, so if you could just do it quietly. So I want to read you a piece by William Irvine, who's an author and a philosophy professor, and this is what he writes. You always know when you're doing something for the first time, and you almost never know when you're doing something for the last time. There was or will be a last time for everything you do, from climbing a tree to changing a diaper, and living with a practiced awareness of that fact can make even the most routine day feel like it's bursting with blessings. To explain why someone might want to start thinking seriously about last times, Bill Irvine asks us to imagine a rare but relatable event, going to your favorite restaurant. I'm reading this now before we get hungry. Going to your favorite restaurant one last time knowing it's about to close up for good. Predictably, dining on this last night ever makes for a much richer experience than almost all the other times you've eaten at that restaurant. But it's not because of the food or the decor or the service is any different than usual. It's better because you know it's the last time, so you're apt to savor everything you can about it. Things become clearer than ever, how great it was while it lasted, and how little the petty stuff mattered. It's an exceptionally rare situation, though. Almost always, we do things for the last time without knowing it. There was a last time on an actual calendar date when you drew a picture with crayons purely for your own pleasure. A last time you excitedly popped a Blockbuster rental into your VCR. A last time you played fetch with a certain dog. Whenever the last time happened, it was now at that time. You've certainly heard the heart-wrenching insight that there's always a last time a parent picks up their child. By a certain age, the child is too big, which means there's always an ordinary day when the parent picks up and puts down their child as they had 1,000 times before, with no awareness that it was the last time. Ultimately, there will be as many last times as there were first times. For 99% of these times, you will have no idea that's what it was. Many last times are still a long way in the future, of course. The trouble is you don't know which ones. The solution Irvine suggests is to frequently imagine that this is the last time, even when it's probably not. A few times a day, whatever you're doing, you assume you're doing that thing for the last time, and you'll think about what if it was the last time. The point isn't to make life into a series of desperate goodbyes. You can go ahead and do things more or less normally, he writes. But you might find, though, that when you frame it as a potential last time, you pay more attention to it. It brings perspective to your life as it is now, and it never gets old. Some people have already mentioned and asked me this week if I was okay, because you noticed that I got very emotional last week during the Unatana Tokef. And I was emotional, I'm fine. I was emotional because I was imagining, or not imagining, that this will be one of the last times that I ever hear this Unatana Tokef sang exactly this way with exactly these people. But I said to myself, well, but we still have Yom Kippur, so it's not really the last time. And then we got the unfortunate call this afternoon that Cantor Simon has laryngitis. So we don't know if it was the last time. It might have been, it might not. And that's really precisely the point. How many people said to me how badly they feel that it's, Cantor Simon's leaving, and as I keep saying to you over and over, he's still here. It doesn't have to be the last time you hear him sing, even if he can't sing Kol Nidre. But tonight for our congregation is the first time. It's the first time that we welcome Cantor Rosenblatt to sing Kol Nidre and to daven the Kol Nidre service. My husband asked me today, what would you do if she wasn't here? And I said, don't even think about it. Rabbis and cantors prepare all summer long to get ready for the high holidays. They very rarely get a call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that says, you're on. So we are incredibly, with a smile on her face as always, incredibly grateful for this first time. And we, of course, wish Cantor Simon a refuah shlema and hope that he will be able at some point, maybe tomorrow, be able to pick up some of the service. Please rise for the blessing over the candles. We remain standing as the ark is opened.
הרמה וכנוסה וכינויי
Shatana, miyom ki Shevitin, Betelin, Umvutalin, La Sharirin, Vela Kayamin, Nidre Vesaron ala Sarai, Ushivuitan ala Shivut.
Kol Nidre Services, Vecharame, Vekoname, Vechinuye, Vekinuse, Ushevusot. Tevana udeacharimna ve'yasarna al nafshatana dina darna udeish tevana Acharina, Ude Acharin, Vedi, Asarana, Halna Shatana, Miyom Kippurim Had Yom Kippurim Habalenu Letova Kol Hon Icheratna Lehon Kol Hon Yahon Shara Yahon Betelin umavovtalin La sheririn vela kayamin Nidrana La nidre Vesaharana Shavuatana Shavuatana La Shavuot.
may be seated as we continue in the middle of page 205.
ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה סלח נא לעוונם הזל כגודל חסדך וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ביד הנה ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Please rise for the Baruch Hu. We're on page 207. May be seated. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, I read this personal roadmap from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Survival Kit. And since there are more of you here tonight, I want to read it again because I thought these are some questions that we could be thinking about, contemplating over the next day and all day tomorrow. When do I feel that my life is the most meaningful? What would bring me more happiness than anything else in the world? What are my 3 most significant achievements in the past year? What are my biggest mistakes in the past year? What project or goal, if left undone, will I most regret a year from now? If I knew I couldn't fail, what would I try to accomplish? What is the most important decision I need to make this year? What important decision did I avoid making last year? Over the last year, did my most important relationships become closer and deeper, or was there a sense of stagnation and drifting? What can I do to nurture those relationships this year? If I could change one thing about myself, what would it be? Are there any ideals I'd be willing to die for? If I could live my life over, what would I change? And finally, what do I want written on my tombstone? And how do I begin to live that way now? We continue with the service on page 208.
Shachvenu uvekumenu nasiach bechukecha v'nisach v'divrei Toratecha uv'nidre
אהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני.
ברוך הוא וברוך שמו.
אוהב עמו ישראל.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto.
Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol me'odecha, v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom ha'levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha b'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'ayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. Yimei hashamayim al haaretz, vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber al bnei Yisrael, v'amarta alehem, v'yasu lahem tzitzit, al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam, v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf, v'til techelet, v'yalachem letzitzit, uritem oto, uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, v'asitem otam, v'lo taturu, acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, leman tizkeru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kedoshim leloechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liod lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet. Page 210. U'malchuto beratzon kiblu aleihem, Moshe Miriam uvnei Yisrael, lechanu shira b'simcha rabba, ve'amru chulam.
Mi chamocha ve'lim Adonai, mi chamocha antar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefer.
Malechutecha rahuvanecha, bokei hayom lifnei Moshe, Zeli anu ve'ameru.
Adonai iloch leolam haed.
V'ne'amar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo mi'ad chazak mimenu, baruch
Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, HaPorez, Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Ve'yav Kol Amo Yisrael, Ve'yav
We continue in the middle of page 212.
יתקדש שמי רבה בעמד דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב במהרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן מעלמה וימרו
Please rise for the silent Amidah, which begins on page 213. those of you that are still saying the silent Amidah, please feel free to take your time. And for everyone else, we will continue on page 223.
Yahweh, Achanunenu me'erev, ve'yava, Shavatenu mi'boker, ve'yira'eh, rinunenu ad
Ya Allah.
Ya לכו, לכו, נרנה לאדוני, נריע לצורישנו, נקדמה פניו בתורה, בזמירות נריע לו. צדק, צדק ומשפט, צדק ומשפט מחכיזך, חסד, חסד ואמת, חסד ואמת, יקדמו פניך, אשר יחדיו, יחדיו נמתיק סוד, בבית אלוהים נהלך ברגש, בבית אלוהים נהלך אשר לא הים והוא עשהו ויבשת ידיו יצר. אשר ידו נפש כל חי, אשר ידו נפש כל חי, ורוח ורוח כל בשר איש, ורוח ורוח כל בשר איש, אשר ידו נפש כל חי, ורוח ורוח כל בשר איש, הנשמה לך, הנשמה לך, והגוף, הנשמה לך והגוף שלך, אדוני עשה למען שמך, עטנו על שמך, כבוד שמך, בעבור כבוד שמך, כי אל חנון ורחום שמך. למען שמך וסלחת לעווננו,
We continue on page 226.
Elerech apayim ata uvala rachamim nikreta v'derech teshuva horeta gedulat rachamecha v'chasadecha tizkor yom v'chol yom lezera yedidecha teifen elenu b'rachamecha ki atau ba'al harachamim v'tachanun v'tfilah panecha nikadem v'odata le'anav mikedem mecharon apcha shuv כמו בתורתך כתוב, וצל כנפיך נחסנה ונתלונן כיום וירד אדוני בענן. תעבור על פשע ותמחה אשם, כיום ויתייצב עמושם. תאזין שבתנו ותקשיב מנו מאמר, כיום ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh, V'Salach Talaboninu Chatatinu, Unchaltanu, Slach lanu, Avinu, Ki chatanu, Mechalanu, Malkinu, Ki fashanu, Ki ata Adonai, Tov v'salach, Ki ata Adonai, Tov v'salach, Ki ata Adonai, Tov v'salach, V'Rav Chesed, L'chol korecha. Kinei kachomer biyad hayotzer virtzoto marchiv uvirtzo mekatzer kein anachnu biyadecha chesed notzer labrit habet ve'al tifen li'etzer labrit habet ve'al tifen li'etzer kinei ka'even biyad hamsatet virtzoto chez uvirtzo mechatet kein anachnu biyadecha mechaya umemotet labrit habet ve'al tifen li'etzer kinei kagarzen biyad echarash birtzoto dibek loor virtzoto perash kein anachnu biyadecha tomechani varash labrit habet ve'al tifen li'etzer kinei kahege biyad hamalach virtzoto chez uvirtzo shilach kein anachnu biyadecha el tov v'salach labrit habet ve'al tifen li'etzer kinei הזכוכית ביד המזגג, ברצותו חוגג וברצו ממוגג, כן אנחנו בידך, מוכל זדון ושגג, לברית הבית, לברית הבית, ואל תפן ליצר. הנה קריה ביד הרוקם, ברצותו מאשר וברצו מעקם, כן אנחנו בידך, אלקנו ונוקם, לברית הבית, לברית הבית, ואל תפן ליצר. כי הנה ככסף ביד הצורף, ברצותו משגשג וברצו מצרף, כן אנחנו בידך, מאמצי למזור טרף, לברית הבית, לברית הבית, ואל תפן ליצר, לברית הבית, לברית הבית, ואל תפן ליצר. Turn to page 229. המלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות, מוחל עוונות עמו, מעביר ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים, וסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות, עם כל בשר ורוח לא חרעתם תגמול. אל הורי אתן לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כמו שהודעת לעניו מקדם, כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן והתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים, ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה, וסלחת לעווננו וחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו, מחלנו מלכנו כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, כי אתה אדוני טוב וסלח, ורב חסד לכל קוראיך.
Please rise as we open the Ark, and we turn to page 233.
Shema,
Please rise. We continue on page 235.
Hashem nu, Bagad nu, Gaza nu, Dibar nu Dofi. Heavy nu, Behir Shanu, Sanu, Chamasu, Tafanu Sheker. Yatznu Ra, Kizavnu, Latznu, Maradnu, Niatznu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Oref. Rashanu, Shichanu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu.
We remain standing and turn to page 237. Of course, we are reciting together as a community the sins that we have done in the past year. And I wanted to read something, author unknown, called For the Mitzvah. For the mitzvah we have done when we held back a sharp and critical tongue. For the mitzvah we have done when we gave a compliment and a hug. For the mitzvah we have done when we gave charity to causes that needed our help. For the mitzvah we have done when we helped strangers or friends in need. For the mitzvah we have done for giving unconditional love. For the mitzvah we have done when we put the needs of the community ahead of our individual needs. For the mitzvah we have done when we thought well of ourselves in situations where we used to shame ourselves. For the mitzvah we have done when we give loving attention to children. For the mitzvah we have done when we took action for the sake of Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world. For the mitzvah we have done when we opened our homes in hospitality to guests. For the mitzvah we have done when we chose not to use products which harm the environment. For the mitzvah we have done when we took action in the face of hopelessness. For the mitzvah we have done when we acted or spoke out in the face of racism, sexism, and homophobia, and acted as an ally to those who face discrimination. For the mitzvah we have done when we resisted addictive use of alcohol, drugs, food, instead of acting in loving and respectful ways to our body. We continue on page 237. Let's read responsively. We have sinned against you unwillingly and willingly. We have sinned against you thoughtlessly. We have sinned against you through sexual immorality. We have sinned against you knowingly and deceitfully. We have sinned against you by defrauding others. We have sinned against you through forbidden trysts. We have sinned against you by scorning parents and teachers. We have sinned against you by resorting to violence.
By public desecration of your name.
We have sinned against you through foul speech.
And we have sinned against you through foolish talk.
We have sinned against you through pursuing the impulse to evil. For all these sins, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. We have sinned against you through denial and deceit.
And we have sinned against you by taking bribes.
We have sinned against you by clever cynicism.
And we have sinned against you by speaking ill of others.
We have sinned against you by the way we do business.
And we have sinned against you in eating and drinking.
We have sinned against you by greed and oppressive interest.
We have sinned against you by arrogance.
We have sinned against you in everyday conversation.
We have sinned against you through conspiratorial coherences.
We have sinned against you through condescension. For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, and grant us atonement. We have sinned against you by throwing off all restraint. We have sinned against you by plotting against others.
And we have sinned against you through selfishness.
We have sinned against you through superficiality.
We have sinned against you through stubbornness.
We have sinned against you by rushing to do evil.
And we have sinned against you through gossip.
We have sinned against you through empty promises.
We have sinned against you through baseless hatred.
We have sinned against you by betraying trust.
And we have sinned against you by succumbing to confusion.
For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. We remain standing as the ark is opened for Avinu Malkeinu. We're on page 243.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
We read responsively. Avinu Malkeinu, we have sinned in your presence. Avinu Malkeinu, act towards us kindly in accord with your name. Avinu Malkeinu, annul every harsh decree against us. Avinu Malkeinu, frustrate the plots of our enemies. Avinu Malkeinu, rid your covenanted people of disease, war, hunger, captivity, and destruction. Avinu Malkeinu, do not look towards our sins and transgressions. Blot them out. Avinu Malkeinu, send complete healing to the sick among your people. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us for good in the book of life. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of sustenance. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness. Avinu Malkeinu, cause your people Israel to be exalted. Avinu Malkeinu, hear our voice, be kind, sympathize with us. Avinu Malkeinu, do not turn us away empty-handed. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion for us, our infants, and our children. Avinu Malkeinu, do this for the sake of those who were slaughtered for their exclusive devotion to you. Avinu Malkeinu, do this for your sake, if not for ours. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us, answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly. Redeem us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Aleinu, Ye'anu Hasi. Asei Anu, Tzedakah v'chesed. Asei Anu, Tzedakah v'chesed, ve'hoshi'enu.
You may be seated. We continue on page 245.
Yitkadav yitkadash shemei Rabbi ve'alem adivra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael v'agalav izman kariv ve'imeru amen. Yehesh mi Rabbi mivarach le'alam ulalmei omaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata shishbechata v'nechemata damiran be'ama v'imru amen. Titkabel tzalotehon uvahutchon decho Yisrael kol dam avuhon divishmaya ve'imeru amen. Yehesh Rabbi min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imeru amen.
This is for the end of the sermon, so if you're all wondering what's about to happen. In January of 2019, when it became more than obvious that the Women's March was being led by many anti-Semites, I was interviewed by the Chicago Tribune, and in the article I said the following: "We can't ally ourselves with people who are anti-Semitic, so it's painful to say don't walk with people who are probably allies with us on so many other issues. But at this point, does the Jewish community say that we can be treated like this?" Several months, I was very sure that that was the right thing to do, was to stay home. Several months later, I heard of a new organization called Zionists, and they had a different approach that actually really spoke to me. Their mission statement says, "Zionists is a multiracial coalition of Jewish activists and allies who are unabashedly progressive and unapologetically Zionist. Our grassroots organizations includes more than 30 chapters across the country that fight for the advancement of social, racial, economic, and gender equality in America and for the inclusion of Zionists in social justice spaces." Instead of staying home, they argued, we would show up to support the causes that are meaningful to us, but we would support each other in going together and being able to safely show up as our full selves as proud Zionists. And so I became involved on the local level, and more I've been hearing over the years from our college students that upon meeting non-Jews and telling them they were Jewish, they would be asked, "Are you a Zionist?" Since Jews don't do well in speaking in sound bites, it became harder and harder to formulate a short answer. Zionist actually provides a toolkit for college students, which I send out every year to our freshmen, to help them to be able to answer this question in a fuller way. Sometime during the beginning of COVID, one of our congregants, David Lerner, called me and said, I think our teens really need to hear from somebody from Zionists, so I think you should call Amanda Berman, the founder and CEO of the organization, and ask her to speak to our kids by Zoom." I said, "David, I don't know her. She doesn't know me. I'm sure we can find somebody local. We're not going to the big boss to ask her to do a Zoom for our teens. Let me find somebody locally." Well, any of you that know our wonderful congregant, David Lerner, knows that it doesn't stop there. He kept asking me. He's like, she knows you. So I called Amanda Berman, ... I'm now chairing the Jewish Clergy Council for Zionists. But I, too, have experienced, and recently and in the last several years, even myself, having people question me about my Zionism. I was at a meeting once, maybe before COVID, so probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a group of Jewish women that were gathered together by federation, from different walks of Jewish life, and the topic we were going to talk about was rising anti-Semitism. And one of the Jewish women said to our small group, the name Zionist has such a bad connotation. Why don't we just choose another name? The shrinking violet that I am said, we lost the name Jew. We can no longer refer I'm a Jew or you're a Jew because of anti-Semitics. Our very name became associated with anti-Semitism. And I'm not willing to give up the name Zionist. What should we say? We're Zionish. Just this past summer, Dan and I were traveling in Italy. And one of the gentlemen that we met said to us, since the Jews took Palestine, why don't the Jews just leave? And Dan has often told me that many of his students think that there was a land once called Palestine. Jews came and colonized it and took the land. So if the French had to leave Algeria, the British had to leave India, why wouldn't you also assume that the Jews would have to leave Palestine? If I had been given the time, I would have answered the following, and there was a little competition about who was going to answer this guy, so I had even less time, because Dan also had a lot to say. If I had been given the time, I would have answered the following, taken from the Zionist website. Zionism is the movement for Jewish emancipation through Jewish sovereignty and the Jewish homeland. Zionism is the fulfillment of the Jewish people's millennia-long dream to return home. Jews are the people of Zion, the children of Zion, and Zionism is the expression of our peoplehood, our faith, our history, our story, and our identity. Zionism and the yearning for Zion united the Jewish people across the diaspora for thousands of years during exile, pogroms, and genocide, as our ancestors prayed toward Jerusalem from whatever corner of the globe and whatever diverse cultures and communities they lived. The word Zion is mentioned 152 times in the Hebrew Bible. Jews are unique in how we are identified because we are first and foremost a people, a nation, Am Yisrael, with a shared history, a shared destiny, a Jewish identity, a unique language, ancient in origin but still in use. The Jewish people have a shared practice and tradition in our commitment to the Jewish religion and the Jewish values we taught from generation to generation. In the Jewish religion, we pray toward Zion, well, not our sanctuary, but most sanctuaries, and we pray about Zion. Love for and connection to Zion is one of the inherent values and principles of both Jewish peoplehood and Jewish faith, and it is inextricable from our identity as Jews. The Jewish people's connection to Zion is, of course, the foundational principle of Zionism. When put in its proper context, it becomes clear that Zionism, culminating in the modern reestablishment of the State of Israel, is the very definition of anti-colonialism. It is the reunification of a people with their ancient, indigenous, ancestral, and religious home, and a turning over of political leadership to a persecuted community, the children of Zion, who spent thousands of years yearning for sovereignty, praying about and toward Zion, and pronouncing their dreams with cries of next year in Jerusalem on momentous Jewish occasions. Zionism is the movement for emancipation and self-determination for the Jewish people, the world's oldest persecuted community, in our ancestral homeland, in the land of Israel, after millennia of exile, oppression, and genocide. Today, practically speaking, Zionism means supporting the State of Israel's legitimacy as the world's only Jewish state, a commitment held by the vast majority of Jews in the world. The modern political Zionist movement began in the late 19th century, a time of terrible oppression of Jews in Europe. Its leaders pushed the international community to understand the Jewish people's historic and inalienable right to self-determination, as well as our 4,000-year-old connection to the land. The movement culminated in the reestablishment of the contemporary State of Israel, formally recognized by the international community via the United Nations in 1949. The movement strived for and ultimately succeeded in creating the modern state that was both Jewish and democratic, an aspiration to which most Zionists around the world remain deeply committed. For most Jews today, Zionism represents their commitment to protecting the State of Israel, which faces serious existential physical threats and an international delegitimization campaign, but which must remain safe, secure, and sovereign if the Jewish people are to be protected. Having said that, Zionist affirms Israel's legitimacy as a member of the community of nations and rejects outright as anti-Semitic any commentary that suggests otherwise. Like all states recognized as independent political entities by the United Nations, Israel's contemporary creation was not without tribalism, ethnic conflict, or bloodshed. But Israel was the 59th recognized UN member state in the first third of UN members out of 192 member states today. None of the other 191 member states face an international delegitimization campaign. And there is transparent anti-Semitism at the core of this disproportionate focus on Israel. The actions of any government in the world is fair game for criticism, but there is a clear distinction between criticism of government policy and delegitimization of the state itself. But these days, I find an internal challenge to Zionism, and is the scariest of horror movies. It's coming from inside the house. It's coming from the Netanyahu government, which is working to undermine Israel as a democratic state, something that we should all be very worried about. Let me read you a statement from the protest movement in Israel. The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principle of the Charter of the United Nations. Okay, it's Yom Kippur. I have to admit, that was not a statement of the protest movement. Who knows where that statement is from, besides Dan? I should have said besides the front row. It's from Israel's Declaration of Independence that was adopted at independence in 1948. Let me just read a little bit of that to you again. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. What is happening right now in Israel with the proposed judicial reform is risking most, if not all, of the values that Israel aspired to in its founding. Over this past week on my rabbinic, conservative movement rabbinic listserv, my colleagues in Israel, they're from the conservative, from the Masorti movement, were begging American rabbis to speak out, begging us to speak out. The days of saying, we don't live there, so what we really shouldn't talk about it. Great leaders in Israel are calling on American Jews and Jews all over the world to speak out against what is happening. I read a piece in The Guardian, not a paper known to be sympathetic to Israel, but I think this piece sends a very important message. It speaks about why anyone who cares about democracy should be rooting for and supporting the protesters in Israel who have been demonstrating every Saturday night for over 9 months straight. As we know, the protests have been mostly peaceful, though our friend Ethan Pagnos was hit by a water cannon. What is also unique about this protest movement, as my teacher, Rabbi Yechiel Pupko, says, this is a protest not by the far right and not by the far left, but a protest coming from the middle. The Guardian article by journalist Jonathan Friedland says, Israel's defiance of Netanyahu holds a lesson for anyone who cares about democracy. What is happening in Israel should matter to Israelis, to Palestinians, and to those Jews around the world who feel themselves bound up with the country and its fate. To fear for the future of Israeli democracy is not to pretend that it was perfect before Netanyahu. But it also matters to those who are a long way from Israel and have no direct stake in it. For this is part of a wider struggle against what is now somewhat paradoxically an international phenomena, ultranationalist populism. Those fighting this global battle certainly see it that way. Polish and Hungarian campaigners recognize in Netanyahu's drive to turn Israel into an illiberal democracy the transformation wreaked in their own countries. Activists have traveled between Warsaw, Budapest, and Jerusalem, trading lessons and advice, and even solidarity videos. Tell your people this must not happen because you might end up like Poland, urged the country's former president, Lech Walesa, in a message to Israelis. Different, but the same struggle. But what I, as a conservative rabbi, have experienced personally in facing the ultra-Orthodox mobs during prayer sessions of women of the wall, I can tell you that if this should go forward, Israel will not become like Poland or Hungary. Israel will become, at best, like Turkey, and at worst, like Iran. Jonathan Friedland continues, Israel is a key test because the pro-democracy movement there has moved faster and more intensively than perhaps any other. For 29 straight weeks, this was written in the summer, Israeli protesters have filled the streets in colossal numbers. They have not allowed the right to denounce them as unpatriotic. On the contrary, they swiftly co-opted the national flag and made it a symbol of dissent. They command majorities in the opinion polls and have the support of trade unions and business leaders who at a critical point mounted was in fact a joint strike. Most crucially of all, they have support of an estimated 15,000 military reservists, including those from elite units, fighter pilots among them, who have either refused or threatened to refuse to serve. In March, this combined pressure succeeded in persuading Netanyahu that he should not stage his judicial coup in a single wave of shock and awe, but instead should slice it bit by bit. This week, when the article was just written, he forced the first slice down the throat of a reluctant Israeli public. In other words, despite massive economic and civil disruption and mutiny that military officials warn has seriously degraded Israel's ability to defend itself, Netanyahu went ahead anyways. The tactics had changed, but his pursuit of the goal had not wavered. That prompts a troubling question for all those engaged in a fight against nationalist populism wherever they are. If all of the strength and numbers Israel's pro-democracy movement has mustered are not enough, what exactly will it take? Can it really be that a nation is powerless to stop a leader bent on destroying his country to save himself? That thought is almost too bleak to contemplate, which is why everyone who cares about democracy, including those who are distant from Israel, should desperately want those protesters to succeed. We need them to win. If you want to see the best of Zionism today, keep your focus on the protesters. Yossi Klein Halevi, author, master teacher, not known to be left-wing in any way, spells out many of the dangers that Israel faces with this government. By the way, Yossi Klein Halevi, Danny Gordis, and Mati Friedman have offered Zooms and speaking to the American public to ask us to please speak out. These are people that, believe me, did not appeal to Jews in the United States to speak out about Israel ever. That's really how desperate the situation is. Yossi Klein Halevi wrote in an article entitled "The War on the Startup Nation," "For me, the most compelling of all the slogans of the democratic movement was imprinted on a giant banner one recent Saturday night at the weekly protest on Kaplan Street in Tel Aviv. Save our startup nation. Even more than a struggle for democracy, this is a struggle to save the Israeli success story. The greatest danger to the startup nation is an immigration of despair. In fact, that exit has quietly begun. And if the government continues to fundamentally transform Israel and its image, an alliance of ultra-nationalists, this is Yossi Klein Halevi, an alliance of ultra-nationalists, religious fundamentalists, and the merely corrupt, we will experience our first ideologically motivated mass flight among those who connect this country to the global economy and the democratic world. In one sense, what is happening to Israel is hardly unusual. Populist wars against elites are being waged all over the world, and yet Israel is unique. While other societies can endure a populist wave of resentment and even violent hatred, Israel's long-term survival in the Middle East depends on maintaining its modernist elite while expanding entry points to the elite to ensure greater diversity. The alternative is gradual or perhaps rapid descent into a dysfunctional society led by corrupt counter-elites. Just as the protest movement is trying to protect the Israeli success story, this government is actively seeking to destroy it. Each party within the coalition has taken responsibility for undermining another aspect of modern Israel. The far-right zealots are in charge of ensuring that Israel becomes an outcast among the democratic nations. The ultra-Orthodox state within a state is laying the ground for the eventual ruin of the Israeli economy, forced to maintain an ever-expanding, chronically underproductive population. And a thoroughly corrupted Likud is in charge of dismantling the independent judiciary, the last line of defense for Israeli democracy. The government, which promotes itself as the guarantor of Israel's security, is the greatest internal threat to our security in our nation's history. Israeli security isn't only a matter of toughness and posturing. It depends on a complex web that includes national solidarity, a strong economy, civil service, confidence in the competence and judgment of our leaders, moral legitimacy of the IDF among our allies, trust among legal authorities abroad that Israel will monitor itself without intervention from the International Court in The Hague. This government threatens every one of those essential preconditions of our self-defense. Why we need a strong court, he continues. Aside from the obvious reason, the absence of a system of checks and balances that are taken for granted by other democracies, there are at least 4 challenges to our democracy that require the active vigilance of an independent court. The first is security. No country besides Israel faces such a relentless assault on its existence. That situation demands constant mediation between security needs and democratic norms. Israel isn't a paragon of democracy because it cannot be, but Israel is a paragon of the struggle for democratic norms under near impossible circumstances, which would have long since ended democracy in almost any other nation that was in our place. Israel is a laboratory for democracy under extremity, and that is a value for the world. Protecting that achievement requires a strong and independent court. The second strain on Israeli democracy is the half-century of occupation of the Palestinian people. Given the inability to safely extricate ourselves from the territories, the occupation remains open-ended. And Dan wants me to say, and I do believe, the Palestinians have to answer for this unending occupation. But the court is the only guarantor that the IDF will avoid the temptation to use indiscriminate force in fighting terrorists embedded in a civilian population, precisely what the far right is demanding, and that democratic norms will be maintained on the sovereign Israeli side of the Green Line. That is not hypocrisy, as our critics claim. It is the unavoidable result of living with constant threat. The third strain on the democratic norms is religious coercion. No democracy today lives with the burden of such extensive religious legislation, from banning civil marriages. I read a horrible article about trying to get a Jewish divorce if you're a woman in Israel, how humiliating that experience is. Secular Israel desperately requires a strong and independent court to protect it from further religious encroachments. Finally, Israel's essential identity as a Jewish state encourages the tendency of policymakers to ignore the needs of its non-Jewish minority. This is intensified by the fact that our minority is Arab, that is emotionally and sometimes politically aligned with a region that until recently has been overwhelmingly hostile to the state's existence, and the court is the last line of defense for minority rights. Israel is unique in another way, he continues. Our elites are not only privileged, but sacrificial. There is no elite like ours anywhere else in the West. Just when we assumed the era of sacrifice was over and the stereotype of the Tel Avivis concerned only with their own interest and pleasure had taken hold in the public imagination, along came the most intense protest movement in Israel's history. Led by veterans of elite combat units, by men and women who have taken open-ended leave from positions in high-tech and academia to devote themselves to saving Israel. The movement is an outbreak of passionate patriotism, a protective embrace of the Israeli ethos. Over and over, protesters tell interviews variations of the same story. I'm doing this for my father, who was wounded in the Yom Kippur War, for my son, who was killed in Lebanon, for my grandparents who were uprooted from Iraq or who survived the Holocaust, For my great-grandparents who helped build the state, now they say, it is my turn to defend the country. One of the protest movement's greatest achievements has been in claiming as its symbol the Israeli flag, refusing to cede it to the right. The movement persists week after week, maintaining astonishing turnouts because its wellsprings are Jewish history and the Zionist story. Do you want to see Zionism in action today? Keep your focus on the protesters. Lonnie Nasser, JUF president and member of Am Yisrael, delivered this, I'm going to read part of the speech he delivered at JUF's annual meeting just last week. This year we celebrated Israel's 75th anniversary of independence, a miraculous milestone which our grandparents couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams. And yet we are keenly aware that this milestone was reached at a uniquely tumultuous, eventful, and challenging time in Israeli history. I know that many are deeply concerned about the domestic policies being discussed and implemented by the current government and their implications for Israeli society. But in the words of Golda Meir, pessimism is a luxury that a Jew can never allow himself. That conviction must guide us now. The Israeli people aren't giving up, and neither can we. He writes, or he spoke, for 36 weeks in a row, every Saturday night and beyond, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets to protest. One day, an estimated 600,000 Israelis gathered. That's equivalent to nearly 20 million Americans, or the population of the entire state of New York. These demonstrators are not burning the Israeli flag. They are holding it up high and fighting for their vision of what this flag represents. It is the most profoundly inspiring display of democracy that many of us have ever seen. At one point, in the scorching heat of nearly 100 degrees, a convoy of thousands marched from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Thousands more Israelis joined in cars and on foot, bringing food and drinks for the marchers and encouraging them along the way. I'll say it, he says it again, the Israeli people aren't giving up, and neither can we. But instead of just describing what this protest movement looks like, I want to show you a video that was made by the protest movement in Israel.
הולכים להרגיש רביעי, חמישי, שישי, שבת במוצא שהיעד הוא להגיע לכנסת.
השביל הזה מתחיל כאן
תבואו לחלק מהזמן, לכל הזמן, ברכב, עם פרשים, עם טרקטורים. עם ישראל עולה לרגל כמו שעשו לפני אלפי שנים.
לא תמיד מסומן
כל מי שלא יצא היום יתחרט כל החיים שלו.
השביל הזה מתחיל כאן חוצה את העיר עולה על ההר ממשיך על הים ממשיך גם מחר חותך באוויר בין הבתים יוצא לאור אל חיים חדשים
תפסיקו לברוח בין העם לבין הממשלה.
מלאכי ציפורים מעליך
נגנו לשלום
מלווים את צעדיך מרחוק נדלק
שיירה אינסופית, זה לא יאומן.
אל תסתה כדי שנוכל לחזור השיר הזה מתחיל כאן כחול על הדף הלבן
Still a Zionist, I keep my focus on the protesters, and as they said, Od lo avda tikvatenu, I have not lost the hope, the dream of 2,000 years to be a free people in our land. Gamar Chatima Tova. Please rise as the ark is opened for Aleinu. We're on page 246.
Malchut Shalchachi, U'ametim Lach B'chavod, Kakatu B'toratecha, Adonai Yimloch, Le'olam Va'ed, V'namar, V'haya Adonai, L'melech HaKol Haaretz, V'yom Hahu, V'yom Hahu, Yeh Adonai Echad, U'shemo
You may be seated. Just a moment, we're going to continue with the mourner's Kaddish, but on Kol Nidre, we always read the names of members of the congregation and loved ones of the congregation, if we have their names, who passed away in this past year. David Bernstein, Jerry Faye Bernstein, Lee Brown, Ellie Burton, Amos Chernoff, Miriam Aviva Cohn, Diana Engorn, Nancy Epstein, Harry Feiger, Neil Fenton, Perry Goldberg, Ralph Gorin, Harvey Hara, Linda Malice Hirsch, Carol Hockman, Steve Johnson, Seymour Kornbluth, Sheldon Lerman, Rena Olenek, Victor Robb, Irma Raskin, Moisey Raskin, Rita Rosenthal, Phyllis Roeder, Arlene Sands, David Silver, Davida Wendy Simon, Blanche S. Singer, Ann Sklar, Blossom Skolnick, Bernice Spivak, Maxine Stein, Sarah Turco, and Daniel Weinstein. All mourners and anyone observing a yortzeit, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayedechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach leolam omeomaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tufpachata v'nechamata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You may be seated.
I wanted to take a couple of moments to say a few words. First of all, I wanted to thank Cantor Rosenblatt. It's been an absolute pleasure to share the pulpit with her, and I'm looking forward to doing it until the middle of next year. And it is really nice that she was able to have my back today. She is a delight to work with, lovely voice, sparkling personality, and I think the congregation is very, very fortunate to be looking forward to having her with us, and I look forward to sitting back there with my wife next year. The rabbi mentioned that I will not be retiring until the end of June next year, so I'm not giving a farewell address now. I do, however, want to acknowledge some very special people who have added so much beauty to our high holiday services for many, many years. Pete Polhammer, our choir director, has been with me every step of the way in the last 40 years. He has immersed himself in our prayers and traditions and gave a special gift to Am Yisrael when he composed melodies for Hodo Al Eretz and Seush Yarim, which you will hear one more time tomorrow. Pete, I will miss your resounding bass voice and our annual family affair known as choir rehearsal. But I am so grateful that our friendship prevails and we get to see you and current and past choir members at the annual summer party at our home. In 1987, Pete was acting in the play 1776 at the Marriott Lincolnshire. He knew that I was looking for a tenor, so he invited me backstage to meet one of his castmates, Fred Zimmerman. The rest is history. Fred has been a loyal choir member and friend. I'll miss you, Fred, and all the stories and jokes that kept our rehearsals light and full of laughter. In addition to seeing you next summer, we'll try to catch one of your area gigs as the Chicago Mentalist. Good plug? Rachel Goodman joined us a few years ago before the pandemic hit. I hired her fresh out of college. Our choir has had a history of standout sopranos, and you kept that tradition going. Although you were by far the youngest of the group, you were joyfully adopted by your fellow choir singers as part of our family. We look forward to catching one of your area gigs as well. Thank you, Rachel. I don't know how many years ago exactly Corey Berman joined us as our keyboard accompanist, succeeding the late brilliant Brent Weiland. Corey is a fantastic multi-instrumentalist. Originally in Chicago, Corey played saxophone and clarinet in the Shabbatones, our Friday night live band. Although Corey and his wife moved to Washington State, he has still flown back to Chicago to accompany us during the high holidays every year since he left town. Corey, I can't thank you enough for your friendship and loyalty, and I hope we can still connect during your occasional trips to Chicago. Am Yisrael's own Jonah Greenthal has been a godsend to the choir. He accompanied us during our rehearsals and took it upon himself to rewrite all the choir music with clarity and precision. Prior to Jonah's initiative, we used what we inherited, dog-eared and faded music, which was incredibly challenging. Jonah, I watched you grow from a kid to a brilliant, confident, successful married man, and I could not be more proud of you. Finally, you're about to hear my son Jeff and my nephew Rob in their Yigdal duet one more time. If you don't know which one is which by now, give up. You never will. A few years after I became cantor in Am Yisrael, Jeff did his duet with me. A number of years later, Jeff opted out and Rob took his place. I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but Jeff said that it's time for the old man to take a seat and let the pros take over. Undoubtedly, it was an improvement. I love you guys, and I thank you for giving Am Yisrael its annual highlight of our high holiday services. Gamar Chatima Tova.
We are in the planning stages of an event to honor Cantor Simon. Probably will be in June, so stay tuned. You'll get more information about that. And as I say over and over, you can still see him every Shabbat. He's with us. Several years ago, we started the tradition of not only just reading about people that have died in the congregation, but to talk about and to read the names, if we have them, of the babies that were born in the last year, the children and grandchildren of our members. I think our newest one, Grayson Smith, Miles Jonathan Goldberg, Misgav Aryeh Kamen, Addison Leo Cohn, Sienna Kate Haas, Adina Faye Gerby, Hayes Levitt Elian, Rowan Shea Leviton, Paige Jordan Small, Olivia Ann Butler, Toby Abner Sensor, Ezra Orley Wald, Sean Hudson Simon, Brody Maya Wilner, Davis Ford Kahn, Ryan Toby Downs, and Maxwell Samuel Cohn Wallace. In just a few minutes, when services end, once again, like every year in the past, there will be grocery bags waiting for you. The container is already at the synagogue and waiting to be filled. We know that the problem with hunger hasn't gotten any better in the last year since we were together, and there are even probably more people in need now than ever before. So please give generously. You can take more than one grocery bag. You can bring your own. Please fill them up and bring them to the congregation. The container will be out, I think, until the third week in October. We conclude our service with Yigdal on page 250.
Shefa never
נתן לי המועל, היה נביאו נאמן ביתו. לא יכל יבער ולא ימיר דעתו, לעולמים לזולתו. סופר ויודע שצרינו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומר לאיש חסד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רק רשעתו. ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחכה קץ ישועתו. מתים יחיה ברוך חסדו, ברוך הדיית שם נעילתו. מתים יחיה ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדיית שם תהילתו.
Gemar Chatima Tova.